found from the book, Thoughts from the Mount of Blessing, page 6, paragraph 1, that the teachings of Jesus were something new and strange. It was a teaching that could not be received from the priests and rabbis. He spoke to a class of people that were lost, that were undone, and that were in transgression and sin. And yet his message gave them hope. It was a message that they'd never heard before, and it held them spellbound. Somehow in his words, in his deportment, in his behaviour and character, they saw something that held them fixed to him. Yet at the same time, they recognised their own utterly lost and undone condition. They realised that they were destitute and poor in spirit. In yesterday's presentation, I asked the question on the reform line what you thought was the most important waymark, and I contended that it was the increase of knowledge. And the reason I said that was because in the year 1818, William Miller comes to a conclusion of his message. He states that within 25 years, the affairs of this earth are going to be wrapped up. And this was the conclusion of his studies. And we know the word conclusion can also be used as the word binding off. In fact, that's what the dictionary definition of the word binding off is. And 25 is a symbol of the binding off. I then said that between the increase of knowledge and the formalisation of the message, there is nothing different. All that's being portrayed here is that the studies that he's done, the message that he has, is going to be put into a package and delivered to people in a way that's comprehensible and understandable. And this happens between the years 1831 to 1833. We then spoke about the everlasting gospel. We're familiar that the everlasting gospel is brought to view in Revelation chapter 14, verses 6 and 7, connected with the first angel's message. And I think most of us are aware that when we talk about the gospel message that we have got, we consider it to be a prophetic gospel. So we did a comparison between the moral and the prophetic. And what we saw, that each requires 100% obedience. And not only that, but it also requires disobedience without question. We went into the book of Romans to explain the fact that people, Adventists, are allowed to ask questions when a truth comes to them, rather than accepting it at face value. And the reason for that is that Adventists, along with the world, are in God's eyes considered as heathen. in their condition. We obviously recognise that Adventists are God's people, but their condition has become so bad that their conduct and their behaviour, their mindset is totally heathen. And God treats them as such. We went to Romans chapter 3, we went to Romans chapter 7 to show verses to show this. And this explains why they're allowed to ask questions, because when your garments are as scarlet, full of sin, God is willing to come and reason with you and to communicate with you and to explain that his ways are better than your ways. But as soon as you become a Christian and join the ranks, so to speak, of this army, then all questioning has to cease. And the rules are different. Now he requires obedience without question. We then discussed the vision of Habakkuk chapter 2. I gave an example of how we on the message take this understanding of obedience without question, or at least how we should. We spoke about 25:20, if you recall. We saw that it was the vision of Habakkuk chapter 2, the Hazon vision. And we came to the conclusion that the testing message that we have to bring to this church, God's church, is an understanding that they need to see events. So that's the difference between the moral and the prophetic gospel. They have all the same characteristics, but one of them is dealing with events. We also, if you recall, spoke about the Ten Commandments. I gave two examples where you can show and demonstrate that the Ten Commandments are as much prophetic as they are moral. So that's what we covered yesterday. I want to come back to the formalization of the message now. And remember, we read from the Great Controversy, 343, paragraph 2. That the whole purpose of a reform movement is to redeem God's people. God has already paid for his people, but now he has to redeem them. Someone has taken possession of what he legitimately owns, and now he has to buy them back. So we want to understand that. So let's go to the book of Hebrews. Chapter 8. Hebrews chapter 8. I make the contention that 1818 is the most important waymark. You recall the reason for that is that we went to Deuteronomy 18:18, and we saw that there is a prophet that's raised up. That prophet is the same prophet as Moses. If you set the word in that describes a prophet like unto you, the Jews understood this to be Christ. Paul understands it to be that way too. And if you don't obey the words of this prophet and his message, the blood that Christ is willing to take, let me rephrase that, the punishment that you deserve, Christ is willing to take on your behalf. But if you reject the words of this prophet, your life, your blood you will have to pay for. It says in verse 19, I will require it, your life, of you. We see a similar, or the parallel passage spoken of by Peter in Acts chapter 3, from verses 20 to around 23. So we discussed that. And I want to say that the formalisation of the message is nothing more than exactly what we say it is, a formalisation of the information that's here in 1818. It's when this person begins to communicate with God's people. So we're in Hebrews chapter 8. And we'll begin from verse 6. But now hath he, speaking of Christ, obtained a more excellent ministry. By how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. For if the first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. So here Paul is going to be introducing now the two covenants, the old and the new covenant. I think we're all familiar with these covenants. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind, and I will write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. They shall not teach every man his neighbour, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful to them, I will be merciful for their unrighteousness. I will be merciful to their unrighteousness and their sins, and their iniquities will I remember no more. In that he saith the new covenant, he hath made the first old. Now that which decays and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. So I want to take us back to verse 10. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. Put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. So what I want to ask is what those days are. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 8, verse 10, and it says, those days. We want to understand what those days are that Paul is referring to. If you see the context of chapter 8, it's obviously connected to chapter 7. And if we were to go through chapter 7, which discusses the priesthood of Melchizedek, talks about Melchizedek not having mother or father or children. He stands in his own righteousness, we could put it that way. And it compares the ministry of Melchizedek and says that that ministry was a type of the ministry of Jesus. Are you all familiar with Hebrews chapter 7? We've read about the Melchizedek priesthood. The argument that Paul wants to make here when he speaks about the priesthood of Christ is that legally Christ is not allowed to be a priest. Is that correct? because you can only be a priest if you are of the family of Aaron. So Paul makes the assertion that the law has to have changed. There has to be an annulling or a dissolution of the law, change of the law, so that Christ now can become a high priest. And he's going to compare Jesus' high priestly ministry with that of Melchizedek. And he has to do it, obviously in a legal sense, even though the law has been broken. So he's going to explain what Melchizedek's priesthood looked like. So what does it mean that Melchizedek didn't have a father or mother or children? What does that mean? So if you go back to Aaron's priesthood and you start tracing down his children, if you went to any one of the high priests, we could go say to Caiaphas, how would you know that Caiaphas legitimately can be the high priest? What do you have to be able to do? You have to be able to trace back his ancestry, his pedigree. So you know that Caiaphas has a father and a mother. So when he talks about Melchizedek not having father or mother, it's not to say that he was not a normal human being, as some people want to assert. It actually means that he became a high priest according to his own walk with God, not based upon his ancestry. After Melchizedek died, not having sons, the priesthood ceases. So we know that when Christ comes, Christ doesn't have a father or a mother, not in the literal sense, because of course he does, but he doesn't have it in the sense of a legal argument to make him a high priest. So there has to be a disannulling of the law, and the law is the law of ancestry. So now Jesus becomes a high priest based upon what? His own righteousness. It's not based upon conventional rules. So we could put it this way. In Adventism, and this has happened for a long time, millennia, if a person, a lay brother, wants to become a pastor, how does that happen? Obviously he has to go through some educational process, but that's not what I'm referring to. He has to have hands laid upon him, does he not? Mm-hmm. And who is authorized to lay hands upon him? Someone who's had hands laid upon them, and upon them, and upon them. So it goes all the way back. So here we come, the priests. Some people call us the priests of 9/11, disciples of 9/11, however ways you want to characterize this. And we say, by the way, all the pastors, all the priests of Adventism have lost their job. They've been fired. Do you use the word fired here? Yeah? You've been fired by the Lord. You were fired by the way here at the time of the end. And it finally comes to its full completion here at the empowerment. And if you like, it still actually goes on until midnight. But God no longer recognizes the priesthood of Adventism, who, let me put it this way, who are the legal priests according to the law, because they have ancestry, they have a pedigree. There was a change in the law made, 9/11, where a new priest, a new order of priesthood was instigated by God, which was the order of Melchizedek. So, what kind of priests are we? Because we don't have any background to go to. We can't say, oh, this person made us a priest. It was directly from God. We must be all, obviously, perhaps not obvious to some, we must be priests after the order of Melchizedek. So if you want to be a true priest, you have to stand in whose righteousness? In your own righteousness. Just like Jesus had to. Just like Melchizedek had to. You can't lean upon someone else's righteousness. You can't lean upon your ancestry or say, I got this job because my father was a great man. So that's the background of chapter 8. So we get to chapter 8, and in verse 1 it says, now of the things we have spoken, this is the sum, or the conclusion, or the binding off. So he's going to bind up his message now, chapter 8, and through probably up to chapter 10. We have such a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord pitched and not man. Now if we were to carry on reading chapter 8, chapter 9 and chapter 10, Paul is already alluding to this because he speaks about a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord pitched and not man. So this true tabernacle is what? It's the sanctuary. So what's he doing now? He's doing a back-to-back comparison of two sanctuaries. One that man made and one that God made. So this is the earthly sanctuary and the heavenly sanctuary. And that's going to be important for us to understand when we think about this issue of covenant, the old and new covenant. So we've got two temples. Two sanctuaries, one on earth and one in heaven. Sorry, I'm struggling to write on this board because if I put too much pressure on it, it's going to give way. So I hope my handwriting isn't very good at the best of times, it's worse now because I'm struggling to write. So we've got to understand that there's this back-to-back comparison of these two temples. Two high priests, one which was in verse 2, one which is of man and one which is of God or which is in heaven. This is the two covenants, this is the two tabernacles, this is the two types of priesthood. Then we got to the verses that we read. And we're in verse 10, and I'm asking what those days are that he's referring to. So I want us to see that this covenant that's been spoken of in verse 7, but now hath he ordained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. Sorry, that's verse 6. Then he goes into verse 7 and 8, talking about these two covenants, this better covenant. What is the historical context of the covenant that he's referring to? Is it past, present, or future? When Paul wrote this, what's Paul dealing with? The past, the present, or the future? We're not sure? Okay, some people say the past. I want to suggest it's the present. He's already built up his argument that speaks about Christ is now the minister, the high priest in heaven. And he is now inaugurating or instituting this better covenant, this new covenant. We agree with that? Yeah? Paul is speaking about his own history, the history that's being fulfilled. And you can see that if you go to chapter 9 and chapter 10, he keeps on speaking about this back-to-back comparison of how the old, or the past, wasn't very good, and how the present is much better. So if he's speaking about the present, and we're in verse 10, he says, "For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord." Now, when Christ came on earth, 4 BC, 27 AD, 31, 34, then we get to the time period where Paul is dealing, Paul is ministry. Did Christ enter into covenant with his people again? Yes? He's entered into a new covenant. Isn't that what John's ministry is all about? To leave your sins and enter into a new covenant with him, with Christ. So this covenant that Paul is speaking about is the covenant that Christ is wanting to make with his people. He becomes a high priest, goes into heaven and starts ministering on our behalf. That's all the argument that Paul is making here. So when he says this covenant that God is going to make with Israel, so here's the covenant. What are those days? It's before that, obviously. So what days come before the reform line of Christ, which is the line that Paul is in, that he's referring to in this present tense context? I think it's the 490 years, or the 70 weeks of Daniel chapter 9. If you read the context of Daniel chapter 9, we're all familiar with it. It says, you've got 69 weeks, 483 years, before Christ comes, who will then be anointed, beginning the 70th final week, where you have only 7 years to do what? To put away sin. An end of sin. And if you don't put away sin, you won't enter into this new covenant. By the way, when it talks about the end of sin, how do we understand that? How do you understand when he talks about the end of sin? What does that mean to us? Any thoughts? None? So what's God's will? He wants his people to do what? To put away sin, obviously. Did they put away their sin? No. So when you get to AD 34, they haven't put away their sin. But what does God do regarding their sin? Does he keep a track on it? No. Because their probation closes, and he says, I'm not even going to look at you anymore, because now my attention is turned to another class, the Gentiles. 2300 days is split into two sections, the 490 years and the 1810 years. And so afterwards, you can do as much sin as you like. It doesn't really matter, because your probation is closed. So when it's going to be an end of sin, it's either you put away sin, or you can carry on doing as much sin as you like, because now it makes no difference. So, those days, I'm suggesting, are the 70 weeks. I'm not trying to say that's AD 34. I'm just saying that the days that are being referred to are the days of Daniel chapter 9, you've got this time, after this persecution, this subjugation by the Greeks particularly, then, when I say the Greeks, obviously I'm talking about philosophically, it's the Romans that are actually physically there on the ground. After this time period, the Lord is going to enter into covenant with his people. You okay with that? I don't know if we all know, but I presume we do, that Hebrews chapter 8, the verses that we've just read, beginning from verse 8, where it says, verse 8. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord. Now, from that point till around maybe about 11, I think, maybe 10, you're going to see that Paul is quoting from the Old Testament. Do we know where he's quoting from? From Jeremiah. So this is Hebrews chapter 8. And he's quoting from Jeremiah chapter 31. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 31. If you recall yesterday, when we spoke about Habakkuk and we spoke about the vision, and I asked what was the vision on the AD 43 chart, we went through the literal history of Habakkuk and explained the time period in which he was living and the questions that were being asked and that were being addressed. So we also want to do the same with Jeremiah. We want to understand where Jeremiah is in history. So that's my question to you. Where is Jeremiah? Do you remember we spoke about the 7 last Judean kings? We have Manasseh, Josiah, Jehoiakim, Zedekiah, and then we've got Ammon and Jehoiahaz in between them. So here was Manasseh, Josiah, Kim, and Zedekiah. If you were to go to Jeremiah chapter 1, you'd see that Jeremiah's ministry is in this time period here. Begins in the history of Josiah and ends in the history of Zedekiah. So Jeremiah's ministry is a little bit later than Habakkuk, because Habakkuk was here. Here's Habakkuk's ministry, and here's Jeremiah's ministry. And the predictions that Habakkuk was making are now beginning to be fulfilled in the history of Josiah. In the history of Jeremiah. So we're in Jeremiah 31. And we want to go, we'll pick up from verse 27. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of man and with the seed of beast. And it shall come to pass that like as I have watched over them to pluck up and to break down and to throw down and to destroy and to afflict, so will I watch over them to build and to plant, saith the Lord. In verse 27, where it says, that I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of man and with the seed of beast. Is that good or is that bad? How do you read that verse? Some people say it's bad. I'm not sure. Okay, so let's do a little picture of that then. It says, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of man and with the seed of beast. So where do you sow? In a field. So you have a field here. Is this to where Jeremiah is standing? Is it past, present or future? Past, present or future? It says, behold, future. It's future to where Jeremiah is speaking. And he says in the future there's going to be a field and there's going to be 2 sacks. And in this sack there's man, and in this sack there's seeds of beast. And what are you going to do with those seeds? You're going to sow the seeds. And what happens when you sow seed? They grow. They germinate and they grow. Some 30-fold. Some 60. So are you going to get an increase or a decrease? An increase. So when he's going to sow the field with man and beast, is this nation going to grow? Are they going to get more animals? Are they going to become prosperous? Yes? Okay, so it's verse 27, positive or negative? It's positive, isn't it? It's positive. So the days are going to come that something positive is going to happen. Because Jeremiah is here, and what's he already predicting? Something negative is about to happen. Yeah? Destruction is about to befall the land. But he says, in this section, don't worry, because it's going to be better. The next verse explains it, verse 28. And it shall come to pass that like as I have watched over them to pluck up, and to break down, and to throw down, and to destroy, and to afflict, positive or negative? It's all negative. So this is talking about the destruction here that's going to happen with Zedekiah. So will I watch over them to build and to plant, saith the Lord. So there's going to be a destruction, and then there's going to be a restoration or a building up. Verse 29. In those days they shall say no more, the fathers have eaten sour grape, and the children's teeth are set on edge. So the days that are being referred to in verse 29, are they good days or bad days? Bad days or good days? Shout out somewhere because I can't hear you. Bad days? No. They're good days. In those days, no one's going to say the following proverb. The fathers have eaten a sour grape, and the children's teeth are set on edge. What does that proverb mean to you? The fathers have eaten sour grape, and the children's teeth are set on edge. The fathers have done something wrong, and the children are going to suffer. They're going to be partakers of the sins of the fathers. So that proverb is not going to be used anymore. It's something positive. Verse 13. But everyone shall die for his own iniquity. So what does it mean to eat sour grape? According to verse 13. Because it's repeated in large. If you eat sour grape, it means you've done iniquity or sin. Every man that eateth the sour grape, his teeth shall be set on edge. So that means the children are not going to be partakers of the father's sins. Verse 31. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Yeah? So this is what we read in Hebrews. So the days that are coming are these days here, when he's going to plant the field, the things are going to go good, where the children aren't going to suffer for the father's sins, and he's going to look to build up and not afflict. Verse 31. Verse 32. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was an husbandman unto them, saith the Lord. What's verse 32 referring to? It's talking about a covenant that was before. We've got that, because verse 31 says the new covenant. This covenant, it says that were made with the fathers, and their fathers did what? They did sin, they must have broken it, and the children are going to be partakers of that, because their teeth are set on edge. So he says that cycle's going to break. I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was a husbandman unto them, saith the Lord. When is that? What is that a reference to? What history?
The beginning of ancient Israel.
Beginning of ancient Israel. This is Moses, yeah? And when does he make this covenant with them?
Sinai.
Right, Mount Sinai. So we've got two temples. And we've got two covenants. We already saw that in Hebrews. And now we've got Mount Sinai. Yep. So we've got Mount Sinai referring to an old covenant. We've got the tabernacle that was built by man on earth, the old covenant, and we've got the heavenly one. Yep. So we've read verse 32. Verse 33. But this shall